How could they treat her like this? She was innocent the entire time? The family owes her everything. Meanwhile, inside a black car speeding through the city, the adopted daughter stared at her phone with shaking hands. Every headline felt like a death sentence. Comments flooded endlessly across the screen. Monster, fraud, murderer. Her breathing became erratic. No, no. She refreshed the page desperately, hoping it would disappear. Then suddenly, a new article appeared at the very top. Police officially open investigation. Her entire body went cold. Because now, this was no longer just a family secret. The world was watching. Rain poured heavily across the city as police vehicles began surrounding the family estate one by one. Flashing red and blue lights reflected against the massive iron gates, turning the luxurious mansion into something cold and unfamiliar. Inside the speeding black car, the adopted daughter stared blankly at the endless stream of headlines flooding her phone. Her hands would not stop shaking. Every refresh brought worse news, more evidence, more witnesses, more people turning against her. The driver glanced nervously through the rearview mirror. "Miss, where should we go now?" She opened her mouth but couldn't answer. For the first time in years, she realized she had nowhere left to run. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, reporters had already begun gathering outside the building. Security guards struggled to hold them back as cameras flashed endlessly through the rain. Everyone wanted one thing: the truth. Inside the quiet hospital room, however, the young woman looked strangely detached from the chaos consuming the outside world. As if none of it mattered anymore. The man beside her noticed immediately. "You don't seem happy." She remained silent for a moment before whispering softly, "What's the point?" The chairman looked up painfully. The truth came too late. Those 5 words crushed the room into silence again. Because she was right. No amount of public sympathy could erase years of loneliness. No apology could return the childhood she lost. No justice could undo the scars carved into her heart. The chairman lowered his head, unable to face her eyes anymore. Suddenly, the hospital television mounted on the wall interrupted its regular broadcast with breaking news. According to newly released information, authorities are now investigating financial irregularities connected to the adopted daughter and several senior members of the family corporation. The chairman's face changed instantly. "What?" The butler quickly grabbed the remote and raised the volume. Documents appeared across the screen. Secret bank transfers, hidden accounts, bribery allegations. Then, a familiar name appeared. The chairman's younger brother. The old man's breathing stopped. Impossible. His younger brother had managed the company finances for over 20 years. He was one of the few people the chairman trusted completely. But now the evidence suggested something horrifying. This was never just jealousy between 2 daughters. It was a conspiracy. And the adopted daughter had merely been one piece of it. The man in the dark coat narrowed his eyes at the television. They used her. The chairman slowly turned pale as memories resurfaced one after another. Every rumor against his granddaughter, every sudden misunderstanding, every manipulated piece of evidence. Someone had carefully orchestrated everything from behind the scenes, and the real target was never the girl. It was the chairman himself. At that exact moment, the hospital room door burst open. A police officer stepped inside urgently. "Chairman, we need you to come with us immediately." The room froze. The officer's expression turned grim. "Your brother has disappeared." Outside, thunder exploded violently across the night sky. And deep in the darkness somewhere beyond the city, a hidden figure calmly watched the news broadcast, a faint smile slowly forming on his lips. The real mastermind had finally stepped onto the stage. The atmosphere inside the hospital room instantly turned suffocating. The chairman slowly rose from his chair, his expression darker than anyone had ever seen before. The veins on his trembling hands stood out sharply as the officer continued speaking. "We searched his residence 30 minutes ago," the officer said grimly. "He left before we arrived. Several financial records are missing, and one of his private assistants has also disappeared." The chairman's breathing grew heavy. His younger brother. The man he had trusted for decades. The man who stood beside him during the company's rise. The man he considered family above all else. Had been manipulating everything from the shadows. The old man suddenly looked 10 years older. Meanwhile, the young woman on the hospital bed quietly stared at the ceiling, listening silently to the chaos unfolding around her. Yet, unlike everyone else, she didn't look shocked anymore, only tired, as if betrayal had long become something she expected from the world. The man beside her noticed her pale expression and lowered his voice. "You need rest." She gave a weak nod, but before she could respond, the television screen abruptly flickered, then changed. Everyone in the room froze. A live video feed appeared. The image was blurry at first, distorted by static, but slowly a figure emerged from the darkness. An older man, elegant suit, calm smile. The chairman's eyes widened in horror. "You..." It was his younger brother. The entire hospital room fell silent. The man on screen sat leisurely in a leather chair somewhere unknown, a glass of wine resting casually in his hand as thunder echoed faintly behind him. "You finally discovered the truth," he said softly. His tone was calm, almost amused. The chairman stepped toward the television with shaking fury. "Where are you?" His brother chuckled quietly. Still ordering people around like a king, even now. The chairman's face twisted with rage. "Why?" For the first time, the smile on the man's face disappeared. "Because everything should have been mine." Silence. The storm outside rumbled louder. "I spent my entire life standing behind you," the younger brother continued coldly. "Watching you inherit the company, the power, the respect." His eyes darkened. "While I remained nothing more than your shadow." The chairman stared at him in disbelief. "So you destroyed the family?" "No," the man corrected calmly. "You destroyed it yourself." His gaze slowly shifted toward the young woman lying in the hospital bed. And she was simply the easiest piece to sacrifice. The chairman's body shook violently with anger. "You used an innocent child." The younger brother smiled faintly again. "And you believed every lie I gave you." Those words struck harder than any weapon, because they were true. No matter who manipulated the situation, the chairman had still chosen to abandon his own granddaughter. The younger brother leaned back calmly. The adopted girl was useful. Desperate people are easy to control. He swirled the wine slowly in his glass. "Though I admit, I underestimated your granddaughter." His eyes narrowed slightly toward the young woman. "She survived far longer than expected." The room instantly turned ice cold. Even the police officers stiffened. The chairman's voice cracked with fury. "You tried to kill her?" The younger brother said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Suddenly, the young woman finally spoke for the first time since the broadcast began. Her weak voice cut through the room quietly. "Why?" Everyone turned toward her. On the screen, the older man looked at her silently for several seconds. Then, unexpectedly, his expression softened slightly. "Because you were becoming dangerous." Her brows tightened faintly. "You kept searching for the truth. You kept getting closer to the financial records." His eyes darkened again. "I warned them to control you earlier. But your grandfather was too blinded by pride to notice anything." The chairman looked as though he had been stabbed directly through the heart. The younger brother slowly stood from his chair. But none of this matters anymore. The camera shifted slightly, revealing several packed suitcases near the door behind him. "I'm leaving the country tonight." The police officer immediately grabbed his radio. "Trace the signal now!" The younger brother merely smiled. Then his gaze returned to the chairman one final time. "You spent your whole life protecting your empire." His smile deepened faintly. "And in the end, you lost the only person who truly loved you." The screen abruptly went black. The room fell into stunned silence. And beside the hospital bed, the chairman finally collapsed to his knees. The chairman knelt motionless on the cold hospital floor, his shoulders trembling violently beneath the dim white lights. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound left in the room was the endless beeping of the heart monitor and the rain crashing against the windows outside. For the first time in his life, the old man realized something terrifying. Money could buy power. Power could silence people. But neither could turn back time. And neither could repair a heart he had personally broken. The young woman slowly turned her gaze toward him. Her pale face showed no hatred anymore, only quiet exhaustion. That hurt even more, because hatred at least meant there was still emotion left. But she looked at him now like someone staring at ruins long abandoned. The chairman lowered his head deeply. "I failed you." His voice cracked apart completely. "As your grandfather, as your family, I failed you." Tears hit the polished floor beneath him one after another. The hospital staff quietly looked away. Even the police officers fell silent. Because the powerful chairman standing at the top of the business world no longer existed in that moment. There was only an old man drowning in regret. Suddenly, the young woman coughed violently. Blood stained the edge of her lips. The room erupted instantly. "Doctor!" Nurses rushed forward while machines began beeping rapidly. The chairman's face turned white with terror. "What's happening?" The doctor quickly checked the monitors, his expression darkening immediately. "Her condition is unstable again. Her body is under too much stress." The man in the dark coat stepped back to give the medical team space, but his eyes never left her face. The young woman struggled weakly to breathe as another wave of pain hit her chest. Her vision blurred again, shadows swallowing the edges of the room. The chairman grabbed her trembling hand desperately. "Stay awake, please." For the first time since waking up, fear finally appeared in her eyes. Not fear of death, but exhaustion, as though she had simply reached her limit. The doctor turned sharply toward the chairman. "She needs immediate surgery." The room froze. The chairman's voice trembled. "Then do it." The doctor hesitated. "There's a complication." Everyone's expressions changed. "She lost too much blood previously, and her condition has worsened over the years." He swallowed heavily. "The surgery success rate is less than 30%. The chairman nearly collapsed again. 30%. The words echoed like a death sentence. Meanwhile, outside the hospital building, reporters suddenly screamed in panic as multiple black vehicles sped toward the entrance at dangerous speed. Tires screeched violently across the rain-soaked pavement. Doors flew open. Armed men stepped out. The security guards instantly shouted in alarm. Inside the hospital room, one of the police officers received a call through his earpiece. His face changed immediately. "They found him." Everyone looked up. The officer's voice turned tense. "The chairman's brother is heading toward the hospital now." Thunder exploded across the night sky. And at that exact moment, the hospital lights suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the entire hospital floor. Screams erupted instantly from the hallways as emergency alarms began blaring through the building. Red backup lights flickered weakly overhead, bathing everything in a terrifying crimson glow. The chairman tightened his grip around his granddaughter's hand. "What's happening?" One of the police officers cursed under his breath while reaching for his weapon. The power system was cut manually. The room immediately descended into chaos. Doctors scrambled to stabilize the medical equipment while nurses rushed to connect emergency battery support. The heart monitor beside the young woman's bed flickered dangerously for several seconds before turning back on. Beep, beep, beep. Weak, unstable. Outside the room, hurried footsteps echoed through the dark corridors. Too many footsteps. The officer near the door suddenly shouted, "Everyone get down!" Gunshots exploded through the hallway. Glass shattered instantly. The chairman flinched in horror as armed men stormed the hospital floor, forcing nurses and patients to scream and scatter in panic. "They're here already!" one officer yelled. The man in the dark coat moved instantly, pulling the hospital bed backward while shielding the young woman with his own body. "Stay behind me." The chairman stared at him in shock. "Who are these people?" The man's expression turned ice cold. "Your brother doesn't plan on leaving witnesses." Another burst of gunfire ripped through the corridor. Police officers returned fire immediately while dragging medical staff to safety. The once peaceful hospital transformed into complete chaos within seconds. Meanwhile, deep inside one of the black vehicles outside, the chairman's younger brother calmly watched the scene unfold through a tablet screen. His expression remained perfectly composed. "Has the backup route been prepared?" he asked quietly. A subordinate nodded nervously. "Yes, sir, but the police are closing in faster than expected." The older man smiled faintly. "Then we finish this tonight." Back inside the hospital room, the young woman struggled weakly to stay conscious as the sounds of gunfire echoed around her. Her breathing became increasingly shallow. The doctor looked horrified. "She cannot survive this condition much longer." The chairman turned desperately toward the officers. "Get her out of here!" One of the officers shook his head immediately. "The elevators are disabled, and the stairwells are compromised." Another explosion suddenly rocked the floor. The walls trembled violently. Smoke began spreading through the hallway. The nurses screamed again. The chairman's face turned pale with terror as he realized the horrifying truth. This was no ordinary escape attempt. His brother intended to destroy the entire hospital floor. The man beside the bed looked toward the emergency window at the far side of the room. Then his eyes narrowed slightly. "There's still one way out." Everyone followed his gaze. The chairman froze. Outside the shattered window, rain poured endlessly across the dark city skyline. And hanging several floors below was an emergency rescue platform attached to the side of the building. The chairman looked horrified. "That's impossible." The man calmly removed his coat and handed it to the young woman. "It's dangerous," he admitted quietly. Then he looked directly at the chairman. "But if we stay here, she dies." Another violent explosion thundered through the hallway. The room shook again, closer this time. The armed men were breaking through, and somewhere within the smoke-filled corridor, heavy footsteps slowly approached the hospital room door. The hospital room door burst open with a deafening crash. Smoke poured violently into the room as armed men flooded through the entrance one after another, their black uniforms blending into the crimson emergency lights. "Down!" Gunfire erupted instantly. Police officers fired back while shoving medical staff behind overturned equipment for cover. Bullets tore through walls and shattered glass across the room. The chairman instinctively shielded his granddaughter with his own body, despite his trembling age. The man in the dark coat moved frighteningly fast. Before anyone could react, he grabbed a fallen officer's weapon and fired precisely toward the doorway, forcing the attackers backward. The chairman stared at him in shock. Who exactly are you?" The man didn't answer. His expression remained terrifyingly calm amid the chaos. Another explosion shook the building violently. The floor trembled beneath them. Emergency sprinklers suddenly activated overhead, drenching the room in freezing water as sparks burst from damaged electrical wires. The young woman coughed weakly, struggling to stay conscious. Blood stained the side of her lips again. The doctor shouted desperately over the chaos, "She's crashing!" The heart monitor began beeping wildly. The chairman's face turned ghostly pale. No. No. At that exact moment, slow clapping echoed from outside the smoke-filled corridor. Everyone froze. A figure gradually emerged through the haze. Elegant suit, silver hair, calm smile. The chairman's younger brother. He stepped over the shattered glass casually, as though entering a dinner party rather than a battlefield. "What a touching family reunion," he said softly. The chairman's eyes exploded with fury. "You monster!" The older man merely smiled faintly. "You still don't understand, brother." His gaze slowly shifted toward the hospital bed. Everything became complicated because she refused to stop digging into the company records. The chairman roared angrily, "She's your niece!" "No," the man corrected coldly. "She was a threat." The room fell deathly silent. The young woman weakly lifted her eyes toward him. Even now, despite everything happening around her, her expression remained strangely calm. That calmness irritated him. For the first time, the smile on the older man's face faded slightly. "You should have stayed quiet," he told her softly. "You could have lived comfortably without knowing the truth." Her pale lips moved weakly. "And let innocent people suffer forever?" The older man's eyes darkened. "Naive until the end." He slowly raised a gun. The chairman's entire body froze. "No!" Everything happened at once. Gunfire exploded. The chairman lunged forward instinctively. The man in the dark coat moved even faster. Bang! The bullet tore through the air. Then silence fell. Water from the sprinklers continued pouring softly onto the blood-covered floor. The chairman slowly opened his eyes and froze completely. The young woman stared in horror, because standing in front of the hospital bed, the man in the dark coat had taken the bullet for her. Blood spread rapidly across his chest as he staggered backward slightly. The older man's expression changed for the first time. "Interesting." The wounded man gritted his teeth, still keeping himself between the gun and the young woman. The chairman shouted desperately, "Why would you do that?" The man looked toward the hospital bed quietly. Then, through the chaos, he finally whispered the truth he had hidden all this time. "Because I love her." The room froze. Even the young woman's eyes widened weakly in shock. Outside the hospital, sirens suddenly exploded from every direction. Dozens of police vehicles surrounded the building. Helicopter lights illuminated the stormy sky above. The older man glanced toward the windows calmly. Then he smiled faintly again. "So the game ends here." But his eyes still showed no fear at all. Rain thundered against the shattered hospital windows as police sirens screamed from every direction outside. The entire floor stood frozen after the confession. "Because I love her." The words echoed heavily through the smoke-filled room. The young woman stared at the man standing before her, blood slowly spreading across his soaked black shirt. His breathing had become uneven, yet he still refused to step away from her bed. As if protecting her mattered more than his own life. The chairman looked stunned. "You—" Before he could speak further, the older man suddenly laughed quietly. "What a disappointing ending," he murmured. "Love truly makes people irrational." He slowly raised his gun again. This time, however, red laser sights instantly covered his body from multiple directions. Snipers. The police had taken position outside. An officer's voice roared through a megaphone beyond the broken windows. "Drop your weapon!" The older man glanced calmly toward the lights surrounding the building. Then he smiled, almost peacefully. "You know," he said softly to the chairman, "I once truly admired you." The chairman's face darkened with fury. "Shut up." But admiration eventually becomes poison. His expression turned colder, especially when one brother is treated like a king, while the other is forced to kneel in the shadows. The chairman clenched his fists violently. "You chose this path yourself." "No," the older man replied quietly. "You chose it for me the day Father handed you everything." Silence. Rain continued pouring endlessly across the city skyline. Then suddenly, the older man looked toward the young woman one final time, and for the first time since entering the room, there was genuine regret in his eyes. "You should never have been involved in this." The young woman's weak voice trembled slightly. "Then why destroy my life?" The man stood silent for several long seconds, before finally answering, "Because destroying you was the easiest way to destroy him." The chairman closed his eyes painfully as those words pierced straight through his chest. All of this, every wound, every betrayal, every year of suffering she endured, had started because of hatred between two brothers. The older man slowly lowered his weapon. Police officers immediately stormed forward, but just as they moved, he smiled faintly and pressed something hidden in his palm. Beep! The room froze. One of the officers screamed instantly. "Bomb!" Panic erupted. "Everyone evacuate, now!" The chairman's face turned white. The older man laughed softly amid the chaos. "If I lose everything," his eyes slowly lifted toward his brother, "then none of us leave alive." A countdown began flashing red on a small device attached beneath his sleeve. 0059, 0058, 0057. The room descended into complete terror. Officers shouted orders while doctors and nurses scrambled toward the exits. The chairman grabbed his granddaughter desperately. "We're leaving!" But the young woman suddenly looked toward the wounded man beside her. He was losing too much blood. He wouldn't survive moving quickly. The countdown continued. 0049, 0048. Smoke thickened across the room as alarms screamed overhead. Then suddenly, the wounded man grabbed the explosive device scanner from a fallen officer and looked toward the emergency rescue platform outside the shattered window. His eyes sharpened instantly. "There's only one chance." The chairman turned toward him. "What are you planning?" The man looked directly at the young woman despite the blood running down his chest, and smiled weakly. "Trust me one last time." 0041, 0040. The red countdown reflected across the rain-soaked hospital room like the heartbeat of death itself. Smoke thickened by the second. Screams echoed through the corridors outside as police officers forced civilians toward emergency exits. The entire building had descended into chaos. The wounded man steadied himself against the hospital bed, blood dripping steadily onto the floor beneath him. His face had grown pale, but his eyes remained frighteningly calm. The chairman grabbed his arm. "You're injured!" The man ignored him completely. Instead, he turned toward the young woman lying weakly in the bed. "Can you stand?" She tried pushing herself up immediately, despite the pain tearing through her body. The moment her feet touched the ground, her knees nearly collapsed beneath her. The man caught her instantly, carefully, gently, as though she were the most fragile thing in the world. 0032, 0031. The older man watched silently from across the room, strangely calm despite the countdown continuing beneath his sleeve. "You won't escape in time," he said quietly. The wounded man looked toward the shattered emergency window again, then toward the rescue platform hanging below the building. Rain slammed violently against the metal structure outside. Dangerous, unstable, but possible. He made his decision immediately. "We go through the window." The chairman stared at him in disbelief. "That platform is several floors down. We don't have another route." Another violent tremor shook the hospital floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. 024-023. The older man suddenly laughed softly again. Even now, you still choose her over your own survival. The wounded man finally turned toward him fully, and for the first time, real hatred appeared in his eyes. You destroyed innocent lives because of your greed. The older man's smile faded slightly. You think you understand suffering? No, the wounded man replied coldly. But unlike you, I don't use pain as an excuse to become a monster. Silence crashed through the room. Even the chairman looked stunned. The older man's face slowly darkened. Then suddenly, he raised his gun again. Bang! The shot echoed violently. The wounded man reacted instantly, shielding the young woman as the bullet tore through his shoulder. He staggered heavily but refused to fall. The young woman's eyes widened in horror. Why would you... Move, he shouted. 0015-0014. Police officers opened fire immediately. The older man retreated backward into the smoke as bullets shattered the remaining glass around him. The wounded man wrapped one arm tightly around the young woman and guided her toward the broken emergency window. Wind and rain exploded into the room instantly. Far below, flashing police lights illuminated the dark streets like rivers of fire. The chairman reached them, breathing heavily. You two go first. The wounded man looked down toward the unstable rescue platform swaying violently beneath the storm. Then he secured the safety cable around the young woman's waist. Her trembling fingers grabbed his sleeve tightly. What about you? For a brief second, his expression softened completely. The chaos, the gunfire, the countdown, everything seemed to disappear from his eyes except her. 0008-0007. I'll be right behind you. But something in his voice made her heart suddenly ache, because deep down, she knew he was lying. The next morning, when Maya walked into the classroom, the entire room fell silent. Curious, judgmental, and pity-filled eyes immediately turned toward her. Whispers spread through the room like a swarm of bees. That's her. I heard she stole her own sister's boyfriend. She looks innocent, but she's actually terrifying. Maya tightened her grip on her bag until her knuckles turned white. She tried to walk quickly to her seat, but every word felt like a blade cutting into the last pieces of her pride. At the back of the classroom, Lily was still sitting there, calm, silent. She wasn't crying, she wasn't explaining herself, and she didn't even glance at Maya once. Somehow, that silence made Maya even more anxious. What did she want? Maya had expected Lily to lose control, to scream, cry, maybe even attack her in front of everyone. But no. Lily simply sat there coldly, as if none of it mattered to her anymore. And somehow, that was far more terrifying. During lunch break, Maya was suddenly called to the principal's office. The moment she opened the door, her heart nearly stopped. Her mother was sitting inside. The woman's face was pale, her eyes swollen and red from lack of sleep. Beside her sat the principal, wearing a grim expression. "Explain this to me," her mother said, her voice trembling. "What was that video?" Maya froze. She tried to speak, but her throat had gone completely dry. In that moment, she realized every lie she had built was finally collapsing. I just... Enough! Her mother suddenly shouted, slamming her hand against the table. Maya flinched violently at the sound. It was the first time in years her mother had ever raised her voice like that. Tears immediately welled in Maya's eyes, but before she could speak again, her mother stood up slowly, trembling with anger and disappointment. "Do you even realize what you've done?" she whispered. "Your sister trusted you." The room fell into suffocating silence. Maya lowered her head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Her chest tightened painfully as memories flooded back. Lily sharing her secrets with her, defending her during arguments, staying up late to help her study, comforting her after every heartbreak. And she had betrayed all of it. Outside the office windows, students were still gathering in the hallway, pretending to walk past while trying to overhear what was happening inside. The scandal had already spread across the entire school. The principal adjusted his glasses and sighed heavily. "This situation has seriously affected both students," he said carefully. "The video is everywhere now. Parents have already started calling the school." Maya's breathing became shaky. Every second felt like she was sinking deeper underwater. Then the office door opened again. Lily walked in. The moment she appeared, the atmosphere changed instantly. She looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her face was unusually pale. But her expression remained calm, almost frighteningly calm. Maya instinctively stood up. "Lily, But Lily quietly interrupted her. "You don't need to explain anymore." Her voice was soft, yet cold enough to freeze the entire room. Maya felt her stomach drop. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just another fight between sisters anymore. Something between them had broken completely. And deep down, Maya knew it might never be repaired again. Maya stared at Lily in disbelief. "No, please," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. "Lily, just let me explain." "There's nothing left to explain." Lily's voice remained steady, but the pain hidden beneath it was impossible to miss. Their mother slowly sat back down, covering her face with trembling hands. The woman looked exhausted, as though the weight of the entire family had suddenly crushed her overnight. Maya took a shaky step forward. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said desperately. "I never meant for the video to get out." The moment the words left her mouth, the room went silent again. Lily gave a small, bitter laugh. "So that's what you regret?" she asked quietly. "Not hurting me, just getting caught?" Maya froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because deep inside, she knew Lily was right. Lily looked at her sister for a long moment. Her eyes filled not with hatred, but disappointment. That hurt far more. "I spent my whole life protecting you," Lily said softly. "Even when people blamed you, I defended you. Even when you lied, I trusted you." Each sentence hit Maya like a punch to the chest. "But the one person who destroyed me," Lily continued, her voice finally cracking slightly, "was you." Tears rolled down Maya's cheeks uncontrollably now. "I'm sorry." But the apology sounded weak, meaningless. Lily slowly shook her head. "Some things don't disappear just because you say sorry." Then, without another word, she turned around and walked toward the door. "Lily!" Maya cried. For a brief second, Lily stopped. Maya's heart filled with desperate hope. But Lily never turned back. "You weren't the only one hurting, Maya," she said quietly. "You were just the only one selfish enough to ignore everyone else's pain." And then she walked out of the office. The sound of the closing door echoed through the room like the final crack of something that could never be fixed again. Maya stood frozen in the middle of the office, staring at the closed door long after Lily had disappeared. The silence that followed felt unbearable. Her mother wiped away her tears and slowly looked up at her. There was no anger left in her eyes now, only exhaustion. "I don't even recognize you anymore," she whispered. Those words shattered the last fragile piece of Maya's composure. She broke down completely. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Maya sobbed. "I swear I didn't." But even as she cried, the memories replayed mercilessly in her mind. The secret messages, the stolen moments, the lies she told so easily while looking Lily straight in the eye. Deep down, she knew none of this had happened by accident. The principal quietly cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable witnessing the family collapse in front of him. "For now," he said carefully, I think it would be best if both girls stayed home for a few days until things calmed down. Maya's breathing hitched. Stay home? That meant everyone would know. Every student, every teacher, every parent. The shame would follow her everywhere. Her mother stood up slowly, grabbing her purse with trembling hands. "We're leaving," she said coldly. The ride home was silent. Rain poured heavily outside the car windows, turning the streets blurry beneath the gray afternoon sky. Maya sat in the passenger seat, crying quietly, while her mother drove without saying a single word. When they finally arrived home, Maya noticed something strange immediately. Lily's bedroom door was open. Empty. Maya frowned and stepped closer. The closet doors stood half open, several drawers completely cleared out. The framed photo of the two sisters that once sat on Lily's desk was gone. A terrible feeling twisted inside Maya's chest. She turned toward her mother. "Where's Lily?" Her mother didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly placed her car keys onto the kitchen counter and spoke in a tired voice. "She left this morning." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" "She said she needed space," her mother continued quietly. "She's staying with Aunt Claire for now." The room suddenly felt impossibly cold. For the first time since the scandal began, Maya truly understood the damage she had caused. Lily hadn't just walked out of the office earlier. She had walked out of their home, out of their lives. Weeks passed, but the silence inside the house never changed. Without Lily, the home felt hollow, too quiet, too cold. Maya would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night expecting to hear her sister laughing downstairs or humming softly in her room, only to remember that she was gone. And every time that realization hit, the guilt became harder to breathe through. At school, things only got worse. People whispered when Maya walked by. Friends stopped talking to her. Some students openly mocked her online, while others treated her like she didn't exist at all. The attention she once craved had turned into humiliation she could no longer escape. But strangely, Maya stopped defending herself. She stopped arguing, stopped making excuses, stopped pretending she was the victim. For the first time in her life, she was forced to sit alone with the consequences of what she had done. One rainy evening, Maya found herself standing outside Aunt Claire's house. Her hands trembled as she stared at the front door. Part of her wanted to run away, but another part, the part buried beneath all her jealousy and selfishness, knew she couldn't avoid this forever. After a long moment, she finally knocked. The door slowly opened, and there stood Lily. For a second, neither of them spoke. Lily looked thinner than before, quieter somehow. But unlike the broken girl Maya expected to see, there was a calmness in her eyes now, a distance, as if she had already started building a life without her. Maya felt her throat tighten painfully. "I just wanted to see you," she whispered. Lily stayed silent. Rain dripped from Maya's soaked hair onto the porch floor as tears slowly filled her eyes again. "I know saying sorry isn't enough anymore," Maya continued shakily. "I know I destroyed everything." Her voice cracked. "But losing you," she whispered, "was the first thing that finally made me realize who I had become." For the first time since the scandal began, Lily's expression softened slightly. Not forgiveness, just sadness. Maya lowered her head. "You don't have to forgive me," she said quietly. "I don't think I deserve it." The rain poured harder around them. Then Lily finally spoke. "You were so busy competing with me," she said softly, "that you never realized I never saw you as an enemy." Maya broke down crying. Every wall she had built inside herself completely collapsed in that moment. Lily looked at her for a long time before stepping aside from the doorway. "Come inside," she said quietly. And although nothing was magically fixed that night, although the pain would take years to heal, For the first time, the two sisters stopped standing on opposite sides of the door. And sometimes, after betrayal, that is where healing truly begins.